Ever been ambushed in front of your whole neighborhood? That's exactly what happened to me during Patty's 20-minute rant. I just unfolded the property survey and let 47 homeowners realize they'd been driving across my private road for free. Picture this: HOA President Patty standing tall at the podium, waving a $70,000 bill for unauthorized road work she claimed I'd done, warning 60 neighbors that I was ruining their property values. She even had a PowerPoint, fake engineering reports, and 3 lawyers ready to intimidate me. For 6 months, this woman made my life miserable, measuring my lawn with a ruler, fining me for my daughter's parked car, and threatening to condemn my house because I dared to repair dangerous potholes with my own money. What Patty didn't know? Every single car in that parking lot had to cross my road to get there. The road she was so furious about? I'd inherited it from my uncle, who built the entire neighborhood. So tell me, what would you do if your HOA fined you for fixing your own property? Share your craziest neighbor story. I bet you've got one. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Jake Morrison, 52, a retired civil engineer who thought I'd found a quiet neighborhood to rebuild my life. After a rough divorce left me questioning everything, I bought a modest ranch in Willowbrook Estates in 2019. The selling points? Good schools for my daughter Emma's weekend visits, tree-lined streets, and an HOA that seemed reasonable. Willowbrook Estates is like a suburban island dream. 47 homes built in the 80s and 90s, all linked by one winding road called Maple Grove Lane. At first, it was filled with original families who'd raised kids here and actually knew their neighbors' names. But slowly, gentrification crept in. Tech workers and real estate investors bought homes, tore up gardens for security cameras, and replaced friendly driveway waves with next-door complaints. Then came Patricia Hendricks. Everyone called her Patty, but trust me, she was as sweet as a parking ticket. At 48, she was a real estate agent who drove a white BMW, parked it at the exact same angle daily, and strutted around in yoga pants and oversized sunglasses, even indoors, like she was on her way to a VIP meeting about her own importance. Patty moved in during 2020 and instantly crowned herself the neighborhood standards coordinator. She literally measured grass with a ruler. Her husband Richard, a tax attorney, was a quiet man who spent most of his time apologizing for her behavior. With no kids to distract her, Patty devoted every ounce of energy to micromanaging everyone else. And that's how, in spring 2024, after a brutal winter, the battle began. The harsh winter had left Maple Grove Lane looking like a cratered moonscape. Potholes were deep enough to swallow a small dog, and long stretches of asphalt had completely broken down into loose gravel. The metallic grind of car bumpers scraping the pavement became the neighborhood's constant soundtrack. As an engineer, I could tell the problem would only grow worse. I sent a polite email to the HOA board offering to coordinate professional repairs. But Patty replied within an hour, all modifications required board approval and permits. 6 weeks later, no meeting had been scheduled and the road had deteriorated further. Mrs. Chen, the kind 78-year-old 3 houses down, nearly toppled into a pothole while collecting her mail. That was when I'd had enough. I called my contractor friend Tom, a man who carried the permanent scent of diesel and coffee, and together we spent the weekend patching the worst spots properly. We used high-quality materials and did the job right. It cost me $3,200 out of pocket, but at least drivers were safe again. Neighbors immediately expressed their gratitude, several even offering to reimburse me. I posted before and after photos in the neighborhood Facebook group, thinking it might encourage the board to take action. That turned out to be my first mistake. Less than 48 hours later, a certified cease and desist letter landed in my mailbox. The crisp thud of that envelope on my porch at 8 a.m. should have been my warning. Patty accused me of unauthorized infrastructure work and threatened legal action. She insisted my repairs violated HOA aesthetic standards and demanded I remove the materials and return the road to its original condition. Original condition? She meant the dangerous potholes. The Facebook group erupted. Longtime residents defended me, recalling when neighbors helped one another, while newer, wealthier homeowners sided with Patty. Rules were rules. That's when I realized I had sparked a suburban class war. The stale coffee smell at the so-called emergency HOA meeting should have tipped me off to what was ahead. Patty called it for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, when most working people couldn't attend. Only 3 of the 5 board members showed up, but apparently that counted as a quorum in Patty's eyes. When I entered the community center, it felt like walking into a courtroom. Patty was set up like a prosecutor, complete with a PowerPoint presentation titled Neighborhood Infrastructure Violations, a Case Study. She had printed photos of my roadwork from every angle, covered in red arrows labeling them unauthorized modifications. She refused to use my name, referring to me only as this resident, and claimed I had created liability issues and damaged property values. She even said my repairs clashed with community standards, though I had used stronger materials than the original road. Still, the board voted 3-0 to fine me $500 for unauthorized work, plus $200 in fees. The fines were set at $200 per day until the repairs were professionally removed. Apparently, fixing dangerous potholes was treated as a crime that deserved daily punishment. I decided to push back with facts. At the next board meeting, I presented a full engineering report, complete with traffic data, safety analysis, and material specifications. The room was full of neighbors, most of them supportive and tired of dodging craters every day. I calmly offered to donate the work to the HOA if they accepted it retroactively. The repairs exceeded county standards. Patty's response was to produce her own engineering report, which turned out to come from her brother-in-law. His only certifications were in lawn care, and the document was written on landscaping company letterhead. Still, Patty pressed forward. She raised my fine to $1,000 plus $500 per day and created a new emergency rule requiring all repairs to be done by HOA-approved contractors. The only approved contractor was her husband Richard's golf buddy, who charged triple the normal rate. My daughter Emma, who is 17 and more skilled with technology than I am, helped me create a PowerPoint exposing the fake engineering report. When we presented it at the next meeting, the entire room gasped at the landscaper's credentials displayed alongside Patty's claims. 3 board members resigned that night out of embarrassment. Patty quickly replaced them with wealthy neighbors who supported her, promising property value protection. Within 2 weeks, she had a board full of allies, and they not only upheld the fines but added fraud investigation fees to my bill. That was when I realized this was never about road work. It was about control, about one person using power to push out anyone who challenged her. Neighbors began approaching me privately with their own stories. Patty had cited people for using the wrong shade of beige paint, measured fence heights with a tape measure, and fined an elderly veteran for leaving his American flag up past sundown. She thrived on authority, and I had unintentionally become the symbol of resistance against her rule. I also learned something important that might help others in this situation. HOAs can require you to post a bond equal to the disputed fines before you can even contest them, a tactic meant to drain people financially before they have a chance to fight back. Always check your state's HOA dispute resolution rules to avoid surprises. By then, I faced $3,000 in fines and counting, with $500 added every day. The smell of tar from my repairs had faded, replaced by the bitterness of injustice every time I drove over the smooth patches I had paid for. But what Patty didn't know was I'm an engineer. We don't just fix problems, we solve them systematically. And I was ready to dig into exactly who had the authority in our neighborhood, because something about this entire mess didn't make sense. When an engineer starts looking into property records and legal documents, things tend to get interesting. Patty's harassment only escalated. She drove past my house several times a day in her white BMW, slowing to snap photos like some suburban detective. The soft whir of her window lowering became a constant sound of dread. She cited me for grass that barely exceeded the 3.5-inch maximum, actually kneeling down with a ruler to measure.
She fined me for Emma's car being improperly parked in my own driveway, claiming it was 6 inches over some invisible boundary only she could see. Then she reported me to the county for supposed unpermitted driveway changes, even though I hadn't touched the driveway in 5 years. But I wasn't about to accept harassment pliantly. I installed security cameras and started documenting everything. That's when I uncovered something important: selective enforcement. Patty's wealthy allies had the exact same violations: wrong paint colors, oversized mailboxes, cars parked just like Emma's, but she ignored them entirely. I built a spreadsheet because engineers love spreadsheets, showing her clear pattern of bias. One evening, Mrs. Chen came by with cookies that smelled like vanilla and determination. She had been watching the situation unfold and shared her own story. "Patty tried to make me remove my rose garden," she said softly, "the one my husband
Planted 30 years ago before he died. She claimed it wasn't a native species and created extra maintenance." Mrs. Chen's hands trembled as she added, "But I still have all the original HOA documents from when we moved in. Do you want to see them?" That revelation changed everything. Her late husband had been one of the HOA's founding members, and she had preserved every covenant, amendment, and meeting record since 1983. When I spread the papers across my kitchen table, it was obvious that most of Patty's rules had never been properly approved. The original HOA was fairly reasonable: basic requirements about keeping yards clean and limiting noise after 10 p.m. The picky rules about grass height and paint shades were added gradually by different boards, often without community votes. Still, I needed more proof. I spent the weekend at the county recorder's office, tracing property deeds and utility easements. The musty smell of old files and bureaucracy clung to me after 10 hours of research. That's when I discovered something remarkable about the neighborhood's development. The original developer had kept ownership of certain parcels when the homes were built. Over time, most of those lots were sold, but Maple Grove Lane had a more complicated history. When the company went bankrupt in 1995, its assets were auctioned off to pay creditors. The road was transferred to a holding company I didn't recognize, which dissolved in 2001. Their remaining assets were passed to none other than Morrison Development, LLC. Same last name as mine. Same last name as my Uncle Bob, who had been a modest property investor before his death in 2018. I hurried home and began digging through the boxes of paperwork Uncle Bob had left behind, documents I had always meant to organize but never had. Somewhere in that stack of yellowed papers and dusty folders was a deed that would change everything. Meanwhile, Patty intensified her campaign. My fines reached $8,500 and kept rising daily. She threatened to place a lien on my home and arranged a neighborhood standards hearing with county officials. Her plan was obvious: bankrupt me into submission or get my property condemned. But while she schemed, I was experiencing the biggest revelation of my adult life. Hidden in Uncle Bob's estate files was a deed to Maple Grove Lane's private roadway easement. Every car that entered the neighborhood, including Patty's BMW, was driving across land I had inherited. Here's a fact worth knowing: private road easements are very different from public rights-of-way. When you own a private road, you control its use, set maintenance terms, and can even charge fees. Always check property boundaries and easements before assuming a road is public. Many subdivisions have surprising ownership structures that shift legal authority entirely. That night, I sat in my kitchen clutching the deed, my hands trembling with disbelief and anger. Patty had been fining me for maintaining my own road. The next morning, I called a real estate attorney. I needed confirmation because it seemed too unbelievable. 2 days later, in her office that smelled of leather-bound law books and strong coffee, I got the answer that made my pulse race. "Mr. Morrison, you do own that road. The title chain is clean, and you've been legally responsible for its upkeep all along. The HOA has no authority." But I didn't storm over to Patty's house waving the deed. I waited because Patty was about to hand me something better than a quick win.
She raised my fines to $25,000 and scheduled an emergency community meeting to address the problem resident. She even invited the local TV news crew to cover what she framed as a neighborhood dispute. She truly believed cameras would help her case. The meeting drew over 40 neighbors and a Channel 7 news team, whose bright lights made the gathering feel like a small-town congressional hearing. Patty stood at the front with a 20-minute PowerPoint on community standards, complete with blown-up photos of my roadwork labeled as unauthorized modifications. "This resident's defiance threatens property values," she told the cameras, pointing at me as if I were a criminal. "We need community support for enforcement action." I sat quietly in the back row, taking notes and letting her trap herself with her own words. The tension in the room was obvious as neighbors shifted in their plastic chairs and avoided making eye contact. Here's the mini twist. Instead of defending myself, I asked for permission to respond to her accusations. Patty, expecting some kind of apology, smugly agreed. I walked to the front of the room with a folder of documents and spread a surveyor's map on the table. The room fell silent except for the buzz of the news camera. "Before we discuss road violations," I said evenly, "let's clarify who owns the road." The look on Patty's face when I revealed the deed was unforgettable. Pure shock, like she had just been told Santa Claus was real and suing
her for trespassing. I explained that I had inherited the road from Uncle Bob, that every resident had been using my private property for access, and that I had maintained it at my own expense for years. The county official present examined the paperwork and confirmed it appeared legitimate. The HOA never had authority to regulate my private road, I continued. I've been subsidizing this neighborhood's infrastructure while being fined for improving my property. Patty's desperate defense was to call the documents fake or irrelevant. She insisted the HOA had authority and threatened to have the county investigate me for fraud. But her eyes betrayed the truth. She knew the game had changed. The reasonable neighbors caught on immediately. Several thanked me afterward for maintaining the road and apologized for staying silent during her campaign. Around 15 residents left with Patty, but the majority stayed to hear my proposal. "I'm offering a Maple Grove Road cooperative agreement," I said. "Residents pay a modest monthly fee for professional maintenance. I retain ownership, but community input is guaranteed. The fines and legal threats end, and everyone benefits from a safe, maintained road." Patty rejected the idea outright, storming out while shouting that this wasn't over and accusing me of blackmail. Her loyalists followed, but Mrs. Chen stepped forward to organize an information meeting for interested residents. The local news aired the story that night. "HOA road ownership dispute reveals private property rights." The video spread quickly on social media, and public opinion overwhelmingly favored me. Patty's threats made her look extreme compared to my calm and factual explanation. Here's another useful detail that saved me thousands in attorney fees. HOAs cannot enforce liens without court judgments. Many of their threats are empty intimidation tactics aimed at homeowners unfamiliar with their rights. If your HOA claims it will file a lien, demand a court order. Most associations rely on fear, not law. I gave neighbors a week to respond to my proposal. Within 3 days, over 20 had contacted me with interest. Mrs. Chen scheduled a meeting to discuss the road cooperative, while Patty held a rival meeting with her dwindling supporters. The conflict lines were drawn, but for the first time, I had the advantage. And the road deed was only the beginning. As I dug deeper into Uncle Bob's records, papers spread across my dining room table like evidence in a detective case, I uncovered something bigger. Uncle Bob hadn't just owned the road. His company, Morrison Development LLC, had developed the entire Willowbrook Estates subdivision back in the 1980s. Every lot, every easement, every carefully designed curve in our quiet neighborhood, Uncle Bob had laid it all out. The road wasn't just private property, it had been intentionally created as a private access point to boost the value of every lot. It was never meant to be public or under HOA control. Uncle Bob kept ownership deliberately, partly for liability protection, partly to preserve quality standards.
My real estate attorney clarified what that meant for me. As the owner, I had legal authority to control access, set rules, and even charge fees. The only limit was that I couldn't suddenly block residents without fair notice. Otherwise, the power was mine. The financial angle stunned me. In 3 decades, road maintenance had cost around $180,000. My recent 3200 repair had boosted property values by about $15,000 per house. With 47 homes, that meant over $700,000 in collective gains from my work alone. Mrs. Chen added the missing history that tied it all together. The original HOA had been cooperative, focused on basics like community upkeep and good neighbor relations. Uncle Bob coordinated roadwork through the HOA, and everyone contributed fairly. "Your uncle was a good man," Mrs. Chen said over jasmine tea that smelled like justice. "He never acted like anyone owed him, even though legally they did." Patty's rule was a hostile takeover of what had once been a real community. That's when the perspective shift hit me like floodlights switching on. I wasn't just another resident under HOA rules about the road. I was the property owner, and those 47 homes relied on my asset for daily access. I'd been too polite to admit the leverage I held. And here was the sting. I'd been subsidizing everyone's infrastructure while the HOA fined me for the privilege. Their budget didn't allocate a cent for road maintenance. They had been freeloading off my inheritance all along. That night, I made a decision. I could have gone nuclear, put up private road signs, and blocked access until people paid. But that's not who I am. I wanted fairness, not destruction. My plan was to educate the community, offer a reasonable compromise, and use access restrictions only if Patty pushed further. This wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. I hired a surveyor to mark the road boundaries and ordered signage to clearly identify it as private. I looked into insurance implications and consulted a traffic lawyer about procedures. If I was going to assert control, I'd do it properly. The turning point for me was realizing I could shield other neighbors from Patty's tyranny. Mrs. Chen's roses, the veteran's flag, all the petty harassment, it could all end if I cut off Patty's authority at its root. The road was her power source, and it belonged to me. That realization flipped my mindset from defensive victim to empowered owner. But with great power comes great responsibility, and I intended to use mine wisely. The following week felt like gearing up for the most critical presentation of my life. My attorney walked me through every detail of private road ownership rights and obligations. I could post signage, restrict vehicles, set rules, and charge fees, but I had to ensure reasonable access for current residents. No one could be stranded without proper notice. To lock things down, I hired a professional surveyor to confirm every boundary. Watching his precise instruments beep and measure while neighbors peeked from windows felt like mapping a battlefield with scientific accuracy. A traffic engineer spent 3 days at the entrance with a handheld counter, click, 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 as cars rolled by. His analysis showed $50 per household per month would fully cover maintenance, snow removal, and emergency repairs. Emma became my secret weapon. She launched a Facebook group called Fair HOA Governance and began posting the harassment timeline with photos and screenshots. She had a knack for turning dry legal jargon into relatable language, and soon her posts filled with neighbors sharing their own stories. Mrs. Peterson fined over mailbox numbers. Mr. Garcia cited for his kids' chalk art. Support swelled. I crafted a presentation explaining the road's history with maps, photos, and a simple FAQ. My engineering background let me simplify the technical side. I emphasized this wasn't about revenge or money, but about ending harassment and building firmness. The financial math was undeniable. For years, I'd been covering about $150 per household per month in hidden subsidies. My proposed $50 fee was a bargain compared to typical HOA assessments. Mrs. Chen introduced me to other longtime residents who'd endured Patty's reign quietly. Tom offered to donate materials and labor. My attorney continued refining strategy. The traffic engineer volunteered to testify about proper road standards if necessary. I prepared contingency plans for every outcome. If education failed, I'd push formal usage agreements. If harassment persisted, I'd enforce restricted access. If legal threats grew, I'd countersue for harassment and defamation. The nuclear option, total access restriction, was legally possible, but would require coordination with emergency services. Knowledge nugget: private road cooperatives can yield tax advantages when structured properly. Shared infrastructure expenses may qualify for deductions, making cooperative ownership financially smarter than constant conflict. My timing strategy was clear. I'd wait for Patty to escalate again before showing my hand. That way, the contrast between her authoritarian rule and my cooperative solution would be undeniable. I practiced staying calm, knowing her outburst was inevitable. My focus would be on solutions, not blame, and on giving the community a real choice. Community needed a real chance to choose cooperation over conflict. Preparing mentally was just as crucial as the legal groundwork. I had to accept conflict was inevitable. Patty had built her identity on controlling others, and she wasn't about to surrender quietly. Still, I held hope this could actually heal the neighborhood. A transparent, fair system for road upkeep might become a model for handling other shared expenses. Maybe, just maybe, we could restore the spirit of cooperation Mrs. Chen remembered from the early days. The surveyor wrapped up on Thursday, planting flags every 50 feet along the road. The sharp smell of spray paint marking property lines mixed with the sweetness of honeysuckle from Mrs. Chen's garden, a strange blend of legal precision and natural beauty. By Friday, professional signs sat ready in my garage. Private road, Morrison Development LLC, authorized access only, usage agreements required. But I held off. Sometimes the strongest move when you hold all the cards is letting your opponent make the next mistake. Patty didn't make me wait long. Monday morning, a sheriff's sale notice was taped to my door, the paper crinkling in the breeze like a threat made physical. She was trying to force the sale of my house to collect her bogus fines. Her arrogance peaked when she called the local news station to announce her victory and even scheduled a press conference. She was broadcasting her abuse of power to the entire county. I stayed silent, letting her dig deeper while
I prepared the nuclear option. My attorney filed a motion to dismiss the lien because, in reality, you can't just invent deaths and sell someone's house without a court order. But I didn't announce that win. I left the survey stakes standing like little red flags of doom, my private road signs waiting in the garage, holding back until Patty fully committed to her collapse. Meanwhile, the neighborhood fractured further. More people came to me quietly, apologizing and sharing their horror stories. Mr. Garcia revealed Patty threatened to fine him over his kids' chalk drawings. Mrs. Peterson confessed she'd been cited for improper mailbox numbers that had been there for 15 years. "She's lost her mind," Mrs. Peterson whispered in the grocery store, glancing over her shoulder as if Patty might be crouching behind the cereal boxes. "But everyone's too scared to fight her. She retaliates." Then came the twist. Emma's social media sleuthing uncovered that Richard, Patty's husband, was under ethics investigation. His law practice was accused of overbilling HOA clients and running shady kickback schemes with approved contractors. Patty's presidency wasn't about order, it was feeding Richard's business. Every inflated fine meant more billable hours. Every overpriced contractor meant legal fees flowing back to him. I kept that information tucked away, knowing the best weapon is often the one you hold back. Patty's media blitz quickly backfired. Her smug interview about protecting community standards made her look petty, especially standing beside the smooth, well-maintained road I'd repaired with my own money. Local business owners began voicing support. They'd battled the same kind of petty authority abuse from city councils and permit offices. Tom offered to rally other tradesmen for road work. A restaurant owner offered to cater the next community meeting free of charge. Meanwhile, Emma's Fair HOA governance group kept growing, turning social media into a battlefield Patty was losing fast. Emma's Fair HOA governance group had grown to over 200 members, even drawing stories from residents in other neighborhoods dealing with similar HOA nightmares. Patty's supporters scrambled to form a rival property standards protection group, but their posts only made them look paranoid and extreme.
Then Patty overplayed her hand. She circulated a petition to have me removed and started whispering rumors about my personal life. Claims that I was laundering money through fake road repairs, that I was behind on my mortgage. Attacking my character with lies was the final straw. I'd had enough. Friday evening, I sent one calm email to every household. Community meeting, Sunday, 2 p.m. Important information about road ownership. No threats, no details, just an invitation to hear the truth. Patty fired back by scheduling her own meeting for the exact same time, calling it Emergency Action Against Problem Resident. She invited county officials, local media, even hinted at legal charges. Her plan was simple: humiliate me on live TV and crush any support I had left. The stage was set for a showdown. I had my attorney on standby, the surveyor with his boundary documentation, and a folder full of evidence. Patty's harassment campaign, Richard's ethics investigation, everything. Most importantly, I had the deed in my briefcase and professional signs ready to install the moment I chose to end this charade. Sunday was going to be decisive. This time, I would control the narrative. The day arrived crisp and clear, autumn air carrying that sense of inevitability. Both meetings were booked at the community center. Patty's emergency action versus my understated important information. I arrived half an hour early with my attorney, the surveyor, and my briefcase. The parking lot was filling quickly, neighbors visibly dividing sides by which entrance they chose. Tension hung heavy, sharp as a surveyor's stake. Patty had gone full theater. She'd set up a projector, invited the Channel 7 news crew again, and somehow wrangled a county code officer and sheriff's deputy into attending. Her plan was obvious: have me dragged out or disgraced publicly. The turnout was massive, over 60 people, the largest gathering in neighborhood history. Patty had already seized the podium when I walked in. Her PowerPoint blared across the screen, protecting our community from fraudulent residents. For 20 straight minutes, she ranted about unauthorized modifications, waving enlarged photos of my roadwork like smoking gun evidence. She even brought props, a ruler to measure grass height, and printed violations she had fabricated. Finally, with a dramatic point straight at me, she declared, "This resident has shown complete disregard for our community standards. Today, we vote to ban him from all common areas and pursue criminal charges for fraud and property destruction." The applause that followed was weak and hesitant, the mood shifting as
People realized just how unhinged this performance had become. When Patty finally wrapped up her dramatic monologue, she smugly invited me to respond, clearly expecting a desperate plea for forgiveness. Instead, I rose calmly, walked to the front, and laid the surveyor's boundary map on the table where everyone could see. "Before we debate road violations," I said evenly, "let's establish who actually owns the road." Then came the twist that ended it all. I unfolded the original deed and inheritance papers, proving Maple Grove Lane was never public property. Every resident, including Patty, had been using my private road for years without permission or payment. I explained how I inherited it from my uncle, the developer of the subdivision back in the 1980s, and how for 5 years I had maintained their only access route at my own expense while being fined for improving my own land. The county official examined the paperwork. The surveyor confirmed the boundaries. The sheriff's deputy shifted uncomfortably, realizing he had been dragged into a civil matter far outside his jurisdiction. Patty's counter was frantic denial. She accused me of fabricating documents, running a scam, even demanded the county investigate me for fraud. But her eyes gave her away. She knew it was finished. I presented my solution one last time: a cooperative system where residents paid modest monthly fees for professional upkeep. I would retain ownership but guarantee community input, fair, transparent, sustainable. Patty's meltdown was spectacular. She screamed that I was blackmailing the neighborhood, called it extortion, that I asked them to share the cost of maintaining the road they all use daily.
When the room clearly wasn't swayed, she stormed out with her loyal few, shouting threats about the Attorney General and vowing revenge. The heavy door slammed shut, echoing like the final shot in a long, pointless battle. Almost immediately, Mrs. Chen stood to organize the neighbors who wanted to proceed sensibly. Around 35 households voiced strong interest. The county official confirmed the plan looked lawful and urged us to finalize the details privately. Reporters swarmed both sides afterward. Patty's rant about fraudulent residents and property theft made her appear unhinged, while my calm explanation of inheritance and cost-sharing sounded reasonable and fair. That evening, the story spread across local social media. Support poured in, with people sharing their own HOA nightmares and praising the cooperative approach. But the real victory came outside, seeing neighbors actually talking, smiling, and reconnecting instead of hiding behind curtains. For the first time in months, Willowbrook Estates felt like a community again. I thought the Sunday meeting had ended the conflict, but Patty had one last move. She issued a deadline for Friday at 5 p.m. demanding I retract all fraudulent claims or face legal consequences. Her plan was to rally the remnants of her support for a final clash. Friday evening, I pulled into the community center lot with my attorney, the surveyor, and a stack of freshly printed Morrison Development private road signs, ready for whatever came next. Development LLC signs stacked at my feet, ready to be planted if it came to that. The fading sunlight stretched shadows across the asphalt as both camps gathered for what everyone knew was the final confrontation. Patty had staged what she called a Save Our Neighborhood rally. Her backers waved signs that read, "Stop the road bully and protect our rights." She arrived with Richard and 3 of his attorney colleagues, clearly hoping to intimidate me through sheer legal spectacle. Channel 7 showed up again, joined by a county paper reporter eager to cover the viral HOA feud. A sheriff's deputy lingered at the edge, arms crossed, looking like he'd rather deal with real crimes than neighbor drama. Mrs. Chen, steady as ever, stepped forward to moderate, her jasmine perfume drifting through the crisp autumn air as nearly 50 anxious neighbors shifted nervously. I presented my cooperative plan one last time. $40 per month per household, covering professional upkeep, transparent accounting, community input, and a 5-year locked rate. Compared to average HOA assessments, it was a bargain. Patty's counterattack was pure performance. She insisted my ownership was just a technicality. The decades of use gave the community rights, and her pitch grew shriller with each word. She pointed at me like a villain in a courtroom drama. "This man is holding us hostage. He wants us to pay for driving to our own homes." That's when Tom, the contractor, stepped in with the kind of grounded authority only experience gives. He described the real costs of road work, displayed photos of the crumbling pavement before my repairs, and broke down how much I'd personally saved everyone. "Jake's been carrying this whole neighborhood," Tom said firmly. "That road
Should have cost 50 grand to fix right. He did it for 3 and asked nothing in return. I made my final offer, reduced the fee to $40 per month with snow removal included. I gave everyone until Sunday to decide, after which private road signage and usage agreements would take effect. That's when Patty tried her nuclear option. She threatened to sue any resident who signed my fraudulent agreement and announced she'd found a way to build an alternate access road, declaring no one needed my so-called highway. The county official, silent until then, finally cut in. "Ma'am, no such easement exists. The adjacent land is privately owned. No rights of way are available. Construction would cost over $2 million, require years of permitting, and take 3 to 5 years at minimum." Patty's face shifted through shades of red as the bluff collapsed in front of cameras. "I don't care what it costs," she shouted. "We will not be held hostage by this fraud." That's when I dropped the hammer. "Mrs. Hendricks," I said evenly, "you've spent 6 months fining me for maintaining my own property, while your husband's law firm profited off HOA enforcement. You've harassed seniors, targeted families, and turned this place into a battlefield.
The only fraud here is your abuse of power." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the news crew froze, cameras rolling, as the weight of the truth landed on every face in the crowd. Cameras seemed to lock on tighter. I'm offering a fair solution that benefits everyone. But if you'd rather spend $2 million on an imaginary road than pay $40 a month, that's your decision. Just keep in mind you'll still need to cross my property to even start construction. The informal vote was quick and decisive. 35 households supported the cooperative, 8 stayed neutral, and only Patty's Core 6 rejected it outright. By Saturday morning, I installed the professional signs: private road, authorized access only. They went up at both ends of Maple Grove Lane, with a 30-day grace period for residents to finalize agreements. Patty tried one last stunt, rallying neighbors to rip down the signs and calling the police to report vandalism of public property. The responding deputy glanced at my deed and calmly told her I had every right to mark my land. That weekend's coverage showed a calm property owner offering solutions against a hysterical HOA president demanding the impossible. Public opinion wasn't even close. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates feels like an entirely new place. The Maple Grove Road Cooperative is incorporated, with 37 households paying monthly fees through a simple online system. The road has never looked better: professionally maintained, proper drainage, even new landscaping along the shoulders. Patty's reign ended exactly how you'd expect. She was voted out in an emergency election 3 weeks after the showdown. Without fear of retaliation, people chose sanity. Richard's law practice collapsed after investigators confirmed overbilling and kickback schemes. Within half a year, the family quietly listed their home and moved out of state. The ripple effect has been remarkable. I now get emails from across the country from people facing similar HOA abuse, all asking how to fight back. Local news ran a follow-up on HOA reform, and county officials are considering new oversight laws. Our case has even been cited in 3 property rights lawsuits as proof private road cooperatives can succeed. But the real victory is seeing Mrs. Chen's roses blooming without fear of fines. She launched a genuine welcome committee that greets new neighbors with kindness instead of threats. Our annual road maintenance meeting has turned into a block party, complete with potlucks and childcare swaps. Property values have climbed by about $12,000 per home since we brought in professional upkeep, and the cooperative now has a healthy reserve fund. Everyone pays less than typical HOA assessments and enjoys transparent accounting instead of mysterious administrative fees. The biggest transformation, though, is psychological. People wave again. Kids draw chalk art in the street without parents fearing violation notices. Emma's Facebook group has evolved into real community organizing for positive projects. I never set out to be an activist, but this experience showed me that sometimes ordinary people must stand up to bullies even when it's uncomfortable. I learned the value of records, patience, and collective strength. Most importantly, I saw how principled resistance can spark real change when you're fighting for something bigger than yourself. From surplus funds, we've launched the Fair HOA Advocacy Fund to provide legal resources for homeowners facing abuse, partnering with the local Legal Aid Society to run workshops on property rights. 3 nearby communities have already adopted cooperative models after seeing our success. The precedent we set has helped other private
road disputes settle through mediation instead of costly lawsuits. County officials even updated subdivision rules to require clear disclosure of private road ownership. HOA management firms now emphasize transparency and resident rights in their training. My favorite outcome, though, is watching Emma, now a college freshman studying public policy, use this experience in her coursework on grassroots organizing. She's written papers on how ordinary citizens can stand up to institutional abuse, crediting our road war for shaping her career path. Just last week, a homeowner in the next county called me about a pool maintenance monopoly, with board members taking kickbacks from inflated contracts. Residents face massive assessments while the board profits. I'm meeting them next weekend to share our documentation strategies and cooperative model. Our annual maintenance meeting is next month, and Mrs. Chen is planning a potluck to go with it. Tom the contractor is donating materials for stonework at the entrance. The cooperative voted to add bike lanes and better lighting. We're even planning a fall festival to celebrate our 2nd anniversary. This is what community looks like when people choose cooperation over control, fairness over fear. So here's my challenge to you. If you're facing HOA abuse, petty power trips, or anyone using authority to make your life miserable, fight back. Document everything, learn your rights, build alliances, and don't let bullies win through intimidation. Share your HOA nightmare in the comments, and let's create a network of people who refuse to be pushed around by power-hungry neighbors. Sometimes the best revenge is refusing to be a victim.